Live from Capitol Hill, it's the 31st of January, the year of our Lord 2020. This is episode 6 of War and Pandemic. Of course, we have Jack Maxey, the indefatigable Jack Maxey, who runs the site day in and day out in the blog, is joined us in studio. And of course, we have Dr. Stephen Hatfill, the author of 3 Seconds Until Midnight, that has been quite prophetic. If you want to read a book that'll scare you, read Stephen King's The Stand. If you want to read one that you will not be able to sleep at night, read 3 Seconds Until Midnight. Dr. Hatfill was a senior researcher, a biodefense researcher at the U.S. Army's, the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases, which is kind of the gold standard in this area. Now an adjunct professor at the George Washington School of Medicine and Immunology and Microbiology and Tropical Diseases. Yep. A world's expert. And on pandemic, which we started Friday or last Saturday, the mainstream media is finally catching up. Okay, Wall Street Journal, virus outbreak is declared as global health emergency. It's the lead on the Wall Street Journal. The Financial Times of London, they've got the cruise ship that is off the coast of Italy. I think it's now been docked in the middle of the night. They let the passengers off. Still controversial. The New York Times, the paper of record in our country, has the issue about the buying of masks, all that in China. And of course, the Jeff Bezos, Amazon, Washington Post, WHO labels virus a global emergency, and it shows the subway system in China. The mainstream media is finally catching up with the story that we've been following for quite a while. And we called this War Room Pandemic last Saturday for a reason. It was already a pandemic. It was a pandemic back in December and back early January when we first started talking about doing this. Nobody wanted to face the actual, reality of what this is. And Dr. Hatfill, were we wrong to call it a pandemic a week ago?
No. Under WHO's own definitions, once an infectious disease has spread from one regional WHO area to another, it's a pandemic.
Let's talk about WHO for a second. Why did it take so long? What is this emerging? What are they really worth? And this is what upsets me so much. Why the kowtowing to Xi and the Chinese Communist Party in this what they put out? Appreciate their transparency. They're on top of things, everything like that. Why did they wait so long to call it an emergency? What does that actually trigger? And do you think it was enough of really holding China accountable in the way that they kind of looked like they kowtowed? Oh, thank you very much, Emperor Xi, for letting us put this out.
WHO is dependent on other nations for their financing, for response teams, for their programs. And they do have some very good healthcare programs for the world, for low industrial areas of the world, child health programs, this type of thing. But to respond urgently to pandemics, they have a miserable history. If we go back to 2014, Ebola outbreak in West Africa, they didn't want to alarm the Ghanaian government. Doctors Without Borders, Medicine Sans Frontières, were on the front lines. They were there. And they were saying this is out of control. The WHO regional office was miles and miles and miles away, and they were trying to run it remote control, and they never had intelligence on the ground. We now depend, they rewrote their international health regulations. So if you sign on to the WHO, you are obligated to report what could be a serious disease outbreak.
In other words, if you want the money, if you want the assistance, you've got to play by their rules.
Yeah.
And the rules are principally reporting requirements.
Well, this is the nations themselves. So you're not going to upset one of your signatory nations unless you're just like overly certain something is bad. And we can't depend on this. It takes time to mount a defense against...
You're saying we can't depend on... It's just not... The World Health Organization is just something that the Wall Street Journal can put in a headline. The reality is, what is going to actually combat that? And what I mean by that is, and we'll get to some new stats in a second, Jack, in Wuhan, in central China, where this is emanating from, right? How are we going to actually help them quarantine and contain it there? And then, how do you stop the spread throughout the world, and particularly in the United States of America?
From what I understand in Wuhan, and I've watched most of the, it's probably going to run its course there. Now, we're fortunate because it has a very low mortality rate.
What does run its course mean? Walk us through the science of that.
It'll run through the population until you have what's called a herd immunity develop.
A herd?
Yeah, like a herd of cattle.
Right.
Once a certain number...
Because human beings, Homo sapiens, also form this, a defense toward...
Of course. And once a certain number of people in a population are immunized, either they've had the disease or they've had a very low... you may not even run a temperature, some people, when they're exposed to some disease agents, but they immunize themselves. You go to a village in some villages in Africa, and they'll show a 15% background antibodies to Ebola. They've been exposed, but they didn't get it. So eventually these herd immunities develop, and the thing ends. The problem is if the virus changes after that. So right now, we have something that's obviously quite contagious. It has a low death rate. It does have a more significant mortality for pre-existing conditions, such as chronic obstructive airway disease, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, these type of things. I'm not worried about this wave. I'm worried if it changes into something.
Okay, let's go back to this wave just so people understand it. We say run its course. And Jack, what is the current? What's the current infections and death rate?
The current infections in China 9,480, and they upped the deaths up to 213.
That's from 172s on yesterday's show, right?
Right, 170 yesterday, 133 the day before.
When you say run its course, this is a central population of a city that's got 14 million people. 5 million are gone. It's the central Hubei. I think they're talking about they have somewhere, and the numbers are hard to get your arms around, but 70 to 90 million people they're trying to somehow quarantine. And I would ask you, the level, for instance, public health in the United States, if you have to compare China to that on a 1 to 10 scale, the United States being a 10, where would the public health system in China, as you know it, be on that scale?
I don't have enough data.
Okay.
We're talking heavily urbanized areas
Yep.
and rural areas. Their concept of
But
the
key-
barefoot doctor is gone.
Yeah, but the key right now is the heavily populated areas,
It's
right?
the population density that's important. How many people are living per square kilometer? These is a critical factor.
So when you say run its course, how do you define run its course? I mean, how many people can potentially be infected? How many deaths? And how can that help blow out, even on the first wave, throughout the rest of the world? So let's go back to the 90 million population you have in central China with these big mega cities. I think there's 15 of them, over 1.5 million or 2 million people. But Wuhan itself has 11 to 14 million people. When you say run its course, what set of math and how do you do the calculation on the RO and all of that?
You need data. You need accurate data to calculate.
Well,
our
assume
own number.
you're not going to get accurate. I mean, you're going to get what you're going to get, right?
You're going to watch trends. Remember, it's a
But
dynamic.
how can you tell? Because right now people are saying, Hong Kong saying, other people you're seeing coming online that there may be 50 to 100,000 people infected, right? Yet the government's reporting 9,700, right?
Well, actually, let me interject. China is now saying
You gotta
that,
get closer.
that they have 100,000 people under, quote, observation.
Okay.
So likely infected.
The Chinese are wearing masks, most of them. They're washing their hands frequently.
At least on all the papers you see
Yeah.
the masks.
And they're scared. If you listen to some of the podcasts, they're terrified. They will initiate social distancing measures themselves when the fear level gets to a certain...
Social distancing be defined as what? Stay in your house, don't go to work, that sort of thing?
If you've got Ebola, I'm not coming within 6 feet of you. If you got the flu, I'm not coming within 3 feet of you.
And you think people now that's getting out into the population?
From what I've been able to.
Okay, so let's
ascertain.
go back as the CDC or the U.S. Army Bio Research thing. When you guys look at the world and look at this coming out of Wuhan with that density, population density, and what you've been able to ascertain from either social media or whatever, when you say run its course, walk us through what that means.
More and more people get infected. And depending on the pathogen, it will exert social effects. When the Ebola in 2014 swept through, you actually had food shortages. It affected that infrastructure. And this is basically too many people crammed into too small a space, dependent on infrastructures for basic necessities, power, food, water, this type of thing. The infrastructures have to be preserved at all costs, or that many people can't live in that space.
What do you mean now? Because this distribution system, and we're going to have, Jack, I think Joe Norman's going to join us in the second half hour of the show. He's an expert on complex systems. He's going to talk about the integrated nature of the global supply chain with the health system and how that's going to play. But as you see it, is that from the health professional's point of view, do you do an insertion to try to get people to understand they've got to they stay at home, they have to wear masks, they have to wash their hands? How do you, when you say run its course, this is what's concerned me. You've got a population of 90 million. If you say run its course is 500,000 or a million people and 10,000 die, as horrific as that is, that at least gives you some comfort that it can be contained on this first wave coming out of China. But if you're saying that, hey, in the infection rates, 20 million are going to get infected, right? Throughout the 1.4 billion population of China, and that's a different order of magnitude. As you see it today, run its course. If you've seen this thing playing out with the numbers, at least the official numbers, and even the unofficial numbers, right? If they say, 100,000 are under observation, that probably means they're under observation for a reason. They probably got something, right? How do you? I'm trying to get the audience to understand how you guys think.
They have models, SEIR probabilistic models and this type of thing, and you can kind of try to model what's going to happen. There's some very sophisticated models that look at...
And who does that for us?
Oh, these have been done over the years.
Is this the U.S. Army's thing, or is this CDC?
No, infectious disease researchers.
Infectious disease
Yeah.
at Johns Hopkins and these
Everywhere.
other places? Okay.
Yeah. And...
So this is what Dr. Toner did at Johns Hopkins. It came up with the model of the one that he ran that 65 million people died.
Yeah.
What was the difference in that and what he was doing?
Well, that was for an exercise.
Okay.
And
probably get some more money, which I'm sure.
Yes,
I'm sure. Hey, no offense. Hey, Dr. Toner, I'm writing you a check. Right?
Yeah.
I'm writing you a check. I didn't sleep at night when I read it.
No, that was a bioterrorism thing. We want as many deaths as possible for funding.
Right, I got it.
But it's a good exercise, nonetheless.
Okay.
And it only takes a bit of a change in lethality until, you really do have a sort of an apocalyptic scenario.
Well, then what is the lethality here? It's relatively low.
It's relatively low.
Is the infection rates high? I mean, when you work through the math on the calculation.
I keep seeing changing RO numbers. Last week it was up to 3.7 to 4. Now it's like 2.5,
An
2.6.
RO number, explain that to the audience, what that means.
If somebody's infected, how many other people are they going to infect?
So if I see an RO number, and the audience should know when you read it, if you see an RO number of 2.5, that means for every person infected,
It can go pandemic.
2.5 people will get infected off you. You've seen some of these numbers as high as 4.
Yeah.
Historically, and what is the pandemic cutoff point?
I don't mean
one,
pandemic. I meant you're going to have a localized epidemic.
It's epidemic. So what is the cutoff number? What are the numbers? It's a 2.0 for something, 3.0 for something?
Again, it depends on the social situation.
Let's say the social situation is Wuhan, China. I'm just throwing out. I'm throwing out a term.
Or better yet, let's say the social situation in the 1.5 million Uyghurs who are being kept in very densely populated camps.
Oh, that's bad. That's
if it gets into the Uyghur subpop, we already know there's some
It'd be
outbreaks
like
there.
typhus in the concentration camps in Germany.
I was alarmed yesterday when Chicago had a secondarily transmitted case.
Why were you concerned?
They're
then?
bankrupt, and I don't know.
You mean the city public health service?
Well, I would assume so. That's where they take money from whenever you want to adjust city finances.
But up until, when you were on the show yesterday morning, you weren't that concerned because there was no human-to-human transmission so far in the United States. Why is what happened in Chicago yesterday made you more concerned?
Because of the low socioeconomic neighborhoods. These are at high risk, Stephen. These are the ones that are going to be hit the hardest. They're going to have the most morbidity and hospitalizations. They're going to have the most death rates if this thing does turn very lethal.
But the way to stop the lethality is to stop it and to help assist China to stop it there, right? With whatever quarantine
No,
they're going.
this thing's out, and these viruses are doing their own thing now. It's not from a centralized city.
Define for our audience, people like myself and other civilians, when you say do its own thing, I know that means
Okay.
something to you.
I'm sorry. Every time this virus
Jack may come across as a microbiologist, but I'm not. I'm just a schmendrick. So you got to take it down to its common
I play one on
denominator.
radio.
Yeah, exactly.
These RNA viruses are very error prone. By that we mean to replicate, they have to copy their genetic instructions. And they're really lousy at it. They make a mistake. So you don't just have one virus when you're infected inside you. You have these what we call quasi-species. It's still the virus, but it may have a different random mutation than some of the other daughter viruses. Well, what it is, it's pulling the handles of a slot machine. It's looking for the jackpot. It's looking for the mutation that would allow it to replicate a little bit better and transmit a little bit better than its sister viruses. If you pull the handle of a slot machine enough times, you're going to hit a jackpot eventually. It may take 1,000,000 times. What is alarming is once you get to a certain number of people that are infected, the probabilities of this is a lot of virus in Wuhan.
A lot of machine guns.
Yeah. If you just had a population of 18,000 people infected, but 7 million, that's a lot of machine guns. And how many infected was latest?
Over 9,000. That is
Official. 100,000 under
100,000
observation.
under observation.
It's more than that.
You think it is? You think the 9,000 is a low
Yeah.
number?
Well, look, some people aren't even showing symptoms,
Let's.
but they're secreting live virus.
It's asymptomatic and something. Before we got a couple of minutes left in this half hour, I want to get to something. But yesterday, we put a working group together. Secretary Pompeo put a travel warning out: no travel to China. Warned people on the level 4 to China. There's a lot of questions. My phone blows up all day long on the websites. Why? I think certain airlines have stopped service. American Airlines pilot union has sued. What would be the level that you would need to stop air traffic coming in from China into the United States? At what level would you say that should happen at?
I would have done it a week ago
Why would you have done it a week ago?
because we can't predict the future with some of these RNA viruses. 100 machine guns shooting at you, one machine gun. Look, you can quarantine things. People are still going to break quarantine. You can't control everything. But you want to keep the number of people entering the country that could be infected at a level that we can still do case contact tracing.
So it wouldn't be over, because you don't want to cause over concern. You don't
No.
want to hurt the economy too much.
No.
Just in a logical way that CDC and the Army biolabs look at it, you think there's enough evidence now coming from China and Wuhan and seeing it spread to Thailand and other places and in the United States with 5 cases that you think it would be prudent
Yes.
to go ahead and stop air traffic here for some period of time?
I thought it would be prudent in 2014 to do this from West Africa, but no one wanted to do that. We ended up with this Ebola drama on U.S. soil.
I tell you what, we're going to do a commercial. I want to go. Jack, give us the stats again coming out of China real quickly. What do we have?
We've got 9,480 officially sick, 213 dead. They say they've got 100,000 under observation. Watching the videos coming out of Wuhan, I would say it's multiples of that.
But we haven't ascertained all of that social media, how much is accurate and how much is
Yeah.
old stuff. You got to be very careful. The social media stuff, you got to really screen. I know there's a lot of stuff coming out now, a lot of Chinese on social media. That's what I was saying to people. We're trying to ascertain what's real from what's, what's, I'm not saying staged, but things are
But
cut.
even the Chinese press is reporting that, we sent 10,000 test kits to Wuhan.
Yes, yes.
It's a city of 14 million,
Yes.
so they don't have enough test kits.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. I mean,
When you're dealing with something and there's no vaccine, there's no drug treatment, you must err on the side of caution. Because the ramifications of not doing that, if you're wrong and you're trying to second guess Mother Nature, it's not nice to try to second guess.
You're playing with a loaded pistol. Okay, we're
Yes,
going to
sir.
come back with Dr. Stephen Hatfill, the author of 3 Seconds Until Midnight, one of the top bio researchers in the United States of America. We're also going to have, hopefully, General Paul Vallely, if they make it over here to Capitol Hill, and also Joe Norman of the Complex Systems Institute in New England to talk about the global economy and how this is all going to be impacted. Next on War Room Pandemic, Episode 6.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to War Room Pandemic. We're live on Capitol Hill. It's the 31st of January, the year of our Lord 2020. This is Episode 6. Dr. Stephen Hatfill, one of the top experts in the country on pandemics. Jack Maxey, who runs the War Room every day on this. And we're going to be joined in a moment by Joe Norman from the New England Institute of Complex Systems. Also, if we can fit him in alive, as we'll boot him up when he gets here, General Vallely, one of the great heroes in the United States of America. Okay, I want to go to what happened in the break. Italy. What happened in Italy, Jack?
Italy has declared a state of emergency. This will last for 6 months. It will take it all the way through the summer to try and deal with this. They have 2 infected visitors from China who are in a hospital under observation right now.
That's in Rome. In Rome, yeah.
But this is, think about the Italian tourism industry, everything else. This is going to have a big impact.
This was a controversy, too, about this cruise ship. It seems like it docked last night. Finally, the passengers got off, but a big controversy about were people sick, were people not sick. They got clearance, but there's still some controversy about, hey, how did it actually happen? I want to go back to, we started the show a week ago, right, on January 24th, or today's the 31st, so tomorrow it's like 24th, 25th. But this, as we now know, came roaring out of China, and this is what upsets me so much about the signing of the trade deal, Phase 1. I think it's a 25 or 30 man contingent from China. Did they give anybody a heads up about how bad this was? Because the Chinese government, the CCP, definitely knew it. Okay, we got to be very blunt about that. We have to hold people accountable, not like the WHO, kowtowing to the CCP and saying, hey, they're so transparent, they're on top of things. They were forced to do this. This is why Dr. Bradley Thayer and Leah Chan Han's piece in The Hill that came out, I think, Monday or Tuesday, that we've got up on the site, that this is China's biological Chernobyl, exact same playbook. Total incompetence of a regime, a totalitarian regime, complete incompetence, okay? And then all they want to do is cover it up. And I cite Old 100 Names, okay? And the Chinese media, but Old 100 Names is the name, it's a Chinese phrase because there's basically 100 surnames, roughly. Old 100 Names is the moral equivalent of John Bull in England or the deplorables in the United States. It's the basic working people, okay? It's the working people that make society go. So Old 100 Names, and Old 100 Names have a lot of taxi drivers, a lot of cab drivers. These guys in the WeChat rooms in China, if you know this, what they talk about all day long in these WeChat rooms is what's real on the streets of China, right? What's happening. What happened to there were 8 heroes of this entire endeavor when this finally comes up. 8 heroes, Jack Maxey, who identified early on what was going on. Walk us through that.
Well, what's interesting is they have cab drivers, as we know in every city, are sort of the ones who seem to know what's going on better than anyone else. And they had a WeChat room, and they were describing what they were seeing on the streets as a SARS-like virus. Now, these guys were arrested by the authorities.
This will hold it, but this was in early December. So in the
early mid-December, yes.
The first couple weeks of December, they were saying this, okay?
And then the guy who's in the headlines is an ophthalmologist from part of this group, arrested for saying false rumors that were not part of the state media.
There was a very big controversy, spreading of false rumors against the state.
Yes, and yesterday the Supreme
But they
Court...
were arrested. They were put in jail.
They
okay?
were arrested, detained. I don't know how they define it, but yesterday the Supreme Court of China apologized to them and said that we should have listened to you guys. You knew what was going on. Part of the blame game here, because they're trying to pin it on the local politicians.
But listen, this is how often the Supreme Court of China apologizes to old 100 names. Never, okay, never. Because it shows that the system's not working. They don't want the little guy to have a voice. They hate these WeChat rooms to begin with, right? They've got CCP agents in there all the time because remember, this is the place of facial technology. This is Orwell's 1984, right? Complete lockdown. People shouldn't remember. One of the reasons they wanted to get the trade deal done is that they lost half of their hog and pig population they had to kill, and the Chinese, being very frugal people, don't like killing it if they're not going to eat it, right? So just to destroy it. We had Senator Braun in for impeachment. He's a turkey farmer from Indiana. He said, hey, when these things hit, you've got to, quote unquote, depopulate. Basically, you take all your inventory, you got to kill it and get rid of it. And it's horrible. It's a huge thing. This is one of the landmark moments in this, the apology to those cab drivers who, unlike all the officials, remember, President Xi didn't take responsibility for this until last Saturday. The first day we had this show was New Year's Day in China. And one of the reasons I said we had to do this, I spent 2 days up in New York broadcasting as we normally do, because I broadcast a couple of days a week with Miles Guo and the other people at Guo Media, into China to blow through the VPN, and we broadcast all the time on what the CCP is really doing. We did 2 days, as we traditionally do, for the New Year's celebration. And everybody, all these guys wanted to talk about nonstop was the pandemic in Wuhan, right? And I said, wow, this is, for the Chinese, this is story number one, to the fact they said, hey, there's not going to be, the Forbidden City is closed, Shanghai Disneyland is closed, and they never close the Forbidden City. You can't go to the Great Wall. They're shutting down Wuhan. This thing's 10 times bigger than the United States knows, because, Golden Week is the traditional family structure. They all go home. They see mom. They have to sit around there, and they couldn't do it, right? And we knew this was a big story. This is what's so important. It is the little guy. It's the deplorable in China that called this out. And what did they do to him? They arrested him, okay? This is the big thing of spreading false rumors, right? False rumors against the state. And this is why now this thing is and this is what's so revolting about these global institutions. Okay, WHO kowtowing. This should have been called a health emergency weeks ago. Dr. Hatfill, can you sit there and tell me that smart people did not understand what was going on? It's like the Afghanistan report in the Washington Post, that for 17 years we've been lied to consistently by the institutions and the people in the institutions and the media to spin a totally different reality. I don't want to politicize this too much, right? What I want to say is that it's the little guy that bears the burden of these diseases. They've got the worst public health services in their area. They bear the burden. But they're also the truth tellers.
Yes. That's
coming out of social media. In China, you're hearing the truth. Now, some of it is staged and some of it might be overhyped, but there's enough reality coming out of there that should put the mainstream media to shame. You shouldn't have now on 31 January, I don't care about the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times of London and the New York Times, putting your photographs up here today. You should have had these photographs up there weeks and weeks and weeks ago. And if you said, well, we didn't want to criticize, hey, you're supposed to be so smart, the elites in this country are supposed to be so brilliant, ridiculous. And now I want to bring in, I'll get off my soapbox for a second. You guys got me worked up. Dr. Hatfill got me, in the break, got me worked up. Now I want to bring in Joseph Norman from the New England Complex Systems Institute. He's got a paper out with Nassim Taleb, who's the great author, and this joint paper, Systemic Risk of Pandemic via Novel Pathogens, a note. And it's about complex systems. Joe, thank you very much for joining us here on War Room Pandemic.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
Listen, can you walk us through in layman's terms, right? Because we're going to put this up on the site and do an article about it and have your interview up. I got Dr. Hatfill here too. Explain to us what the point you're trying to get across in this paper, because I think this paper is very important for people to read and understand now.
Absolutely. The point is actually very straightforward. You can't go back in time, right? So when we're operating looking forward, we have a lot of uncertainty. So you hear a lot of more academic perspectives. They're saying, well, we need to let the data come in. We need to see what are the true parameters of this thing. But the fact of the matter is, as we make decisions in real time, we have to work with the information we have, the estimates we have. So there's an asymmetry in risk-taking where it's much better to overreact now, discover that perhaps we overreacted in retrospect, than it is to underreact, let this thing grow out of control, and then not be able, then the measures we'd have to take to mitigate this thing become much different.
You're saying by being overcautious now and maybe your reaction, you have to be so draconian later that it offsets the risk mitigation you ought to see today, even if it seems like you're overreacting a bit, correct?
That's correct, and it has to become, so this is a specific case, this coronavirus outbreak, but we're also seeing what the reactions are like in these scenarios. And the problem is that these scenarios are going to arise again, whether or not this is, the big one or a really big one. So what we're seeing is a failure to understand that asymmetry of overreaction early, what's often called paranoia early, allows us to get our bearings, figure out what's going on, and then hopefully return to normal that much quicker.
Let's go back. What in this thing you see today? And you have these institutions, World Health Organization, CDC, you've got the Chinese medical, you've got all this throughout the world. We have systems in place. We have major institutions in place. So what should people see? Is it a set of analysis or analytics that they're not doing or people should do? Or, I mean, what are you recommending here?
It's not necessarily that the analysis itself is wrong. It's the implications of the analysis that people are getting wrong. Academically, typically folks are trained to think in like bell curve distributions. So in a bell curve, you have some tails of the most extreme events, and those fall off relatively quickly. Well, these kinds of systems where you have spreading, contagion, self-amplification, they're a much different kind of probability distribution. And while most of the time things will, die off at some point, in a not insignificant number of cases, they will grow potentially, across the whole globe. And another one of the issues is the degree to which we have long-range transport now means that some of the historical mechanisms that would stop these things, literally spatial constraints, if a virus or a pathogen was, say, very contagious and very deadly, well, you'd have unfortunately a local die-off, a local extinction, but it would remain local. Now that we have long-range connections, essentially from everywhere to everywhere, when you have something that's both highly contagious and highly harmful or deadly, there's nothing actually that will stop it except the upper bound of the population of the Earth. So we need to adaptively disconnect in a precautionary way in order to actually stop that global spread.
Okay, but let me go back because you're at the New England Institute of Complex Systems. One of the complex systems that's leading to this is not just the transportation, it's the logistics chain. We basically have built a world economic model off of essentially manufacturing out of China and then distribution and logistics chain that interacts by rail, by ship, by airplane, by movement of people and goods constantly. On that complex system, I mean, how do you layer them onto each other? Your ability to say, hey, we should stop certain aspects of it with the underlying premise that if you do that, this complex system, which has never looked at the perturbation like this, what happens to that logistics change, and then how does that roll into the global economy down to the wallets of people that are listening to the show?
Well, I think you're exactly right. And what you see is that a lot of the reaction that we're having right now that is not the best for containing and preventing a pandemic is, in fact, in service of keeping the economy going And that's because we do have these global interdependencies and these global hubs of, for instance, manufacturing in China. With some of the economic fallacies that lead to this have to do with, economies of scale and gaining efficiency through centralization. It's not that those observations are wrong, but they're incomplete. And the other side of it you're witnessing right now, where when you centralize something in a massive way, something that you are dependent on, then other harmful agents can also sort of leverage those central hubs.
So you're saying we essentially in building this complex global logistics system, manufacturing, distribution, marketing, that we didn't take into calculation that the efficiencies and the lowering of the cost of production and all of that, we got the benefits of that, but we never actually worked through the system of really the full-scale security of that, not just national security from a military point of view or intelligence point of view, but the security of, particularly with the increasing dense populations of the world and particularly developing nations, that you've got now this essential ability to have these kind of pathogens or have these viruses then go on the logistics chain, which right now we're understanding like, oops, maybe we didn't think about it. If it's a complex system, did people not think about it, or did they, because hey, all these guys are supposed to be, including you, you're all the smartest guys in the room, right? It's the geniuses in the city of London and Wall Street and the corporatists, and they all went to McKinsey. Look, I'm HBS grad. I worked at Goldman. You do the models, you do all the analysis. Is it that it was not thought of, or people just said, hey, that's a cost that maybe we can just defer until that time that becomes a problem, and after 10 million people are dead, maybe we then have to put it in?
I think it's a little bit of both, but with respect to the modeling, every model has assumptions built in. Typically, those are invisible, especially when they become kind of a tradition or very familiar to a certain, say, academic discipline. And the real world doesn't necessarily meet those assumptions of the model. So what happens is
reality sucks, doesn't it? That's a real bite, right? All these geniuses, and let me ask you, Dr. Norm, we got to get back to Dr. Hatfill before we take off. But I got to ask you a question. As you see today, Secretary of State Pompeo came out yesterday and said, hey, nobody should travel. Italy just put out a national health emergency for tourism. As you see, we've banned now, I think, or talking about nobody should fly into China. As you see it, what should we be doing here in the United States today? And would you recommend, if you were part of that advisory committee, that we should just stop all travel, all air travel from China into the United States right now?
Oh, we should have stopped air travel a week ago when we saw this thing growing, and we saw how seriously the Chinese were taking it, freezing entire cities, tens of millions. Clearly, they're taking it seriously. So we should have stopped flights already. Absolutely. It's irresponsible that we haven't. And on the local policy...
Hang on a second. You used a big word there, irresponsible. What do you mean by irresponsible?
I mean that it's the reason we stop flights is to protect American citizens, American residents, those visitors who are here. There's absolutely a national security risk of not stopping those flights. It wouldn't necessarily have to last long. If it did last long, it would say that we did the right thing, and if it didn't, it wouldn't be a terrible, terrible disruption. It would cost something, but it would be much better than the alternative.
This is your point of your paper to say, hey, it's better to a little bit overreact today than to underreact and to have to put in draconian measures later on, correct?
That is correct.
So,
and the fact of the matter is draconian measures are not the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is much worse.
Let me walk through in about a minute we got with you. Walk me through today, if you were part of the advisory committee, to 2 or 3 things that you would strongly recommend that should take place today, maybe even a little bit on the overreaction side, to make sure that you're a belt and a suspenders here, belt and suspenders. What would you recommend?
So you stop the flights, especially from mainland China, but potentially from other local hubs that you're seeing, for instance, Singapore, where you're seeing more and more infections pop up. And then locally, I would encourage precautionary measures of the population in the U.S., including just simple things, washing hands, wearing masks if you're inclined. Anything that can decrease that replication value will have huge impacts on the macro scale, even if they appear minor on the micro scale.
Joe, really appreciate you coming on. We're going to have you many more times in the future. Joe Norman is at the New England Complex Systems Institute in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He joins us, had a paper that we're going to have up with the very famous author Nassim Taleb. We're going to have this paper up on the War Room Pandemic. Jack Maxey. Joe, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
I want to turn to you, Dr. Hatfill, with what Brother Norman just told us. What's your assessment of this?
It's correct. Have you looked on Amazon lately for masks, surgical masks?
Yeah, I noticed even if you're if you're a billionaire, you couldn't. If you're a billionaire and you wanted to buy a mask, you can't buy a mask. Is that a complex system telling us something?
Most of them are made overseas.
In China.
To a good percent, yes. Most of our vaccines are made overseas.
97%, I think.
Yes.
Is that going to be a problem? Is the smartest guys in the room didn't really think through the system? They thought through the system to focus on one variable: lower the cost. Lower the cost so we can get the cheapest junk possible into Walmart, right? And to focus on the consumer side. That was the overriding. That's the general theory of the case. All the analysis, all the assumptions, everything went into that, both the labor, production, where you do it, etc. But they forgot in a very important thing. You have to put in safeguards into the system, and one of the most important safeguards is public health.
Sure. Now, we did the national stockpile, strategic national stockpile, does stock.
President Trump,
Yeah.
right, who signed the EO, he's very, President Trump's on this. I mean, he's
This-
thought about this a lot.
Vaccine production, the 5-year plan to bring this back to the United States, is a strategic measure. It's national defense. You have to be able to protect your citizens.
That's a long-term plan, and that's what President
Yeah.
Trump was doing with the team over there. Did a fantastic job and signed the EO a while ago. But we got about a minute left in today's show. As where we stand today with what Joe Norman said, what would you, if you were able to give, and Joe Norman's up front, he's saying, hey, in his paper, he says it with Taleb, he says, you may be a little bit of overreaction, but you'll do the overreaction, you'll do the belt and the suspenders, because we don't want to do draconian things if it gets out of control later.
I would start a public education campaign right now on the necessity for what we call non-pharmaceutical interventions, NPI.
And what is that?
Frequent washing of hands. If you cough into your sleeve. Constant disinfection of your hands or washing your hands.
Basic stuff.
Basic stuff. Stay away from others as much as possible. If you're coughing, wear a mask.
Now, if you say stay away from others, that's going to affect people going to basketball
Yeah.
games, people going to movie
Yeah.
theaters. That will have some rolling impact on the economy, no doubt.
Yeah, it's probably not to that stage yet where we shut down the pubs and the movie theaters, but we should be teaching people just the basic measures they can do to protect themselves and their families.
Okay, you've had Dr. Stephen Hatfield. He's the author of a book, and we're going to figure out how to get this book out. Just out 3 seconds until midnight. This will keep you up at night. It'll be many seconds after midnight you'll be reading this. He's one of the top biological bioresearchers in the United States of America. We're going to be back. I guess not tomorrow. We're trying to do a special. We got back at 5 o'clock with War Room Impeachment. We're going to have the special UKIP as it strikes 11 o'clock at night in the United Kingdom. And yes, the United Kingdom will finally be free. On the same day they get their freedom from the mega state of the European Union, this project we worked on for years, Donald Trump will be acquitted as the 45th President of the United States in his impeachment. We'll be back with more of Dr. Hatfield, Jack Maxey, and the team later.